to know Christ. Now, I hope that is the charge of our hearts as disciples of Jesus, that we say, I want to know Christ. And look at what Paul continues to say with that. And the power of his resurrection. And the fellowship of sharing in his suffering. Becoming like him in his death. This week, as I was preparing for this sermon and thinking about Easter and thinking about what goes on in our culture and what's going on, and I was reading through some of the news of what was going on around the world. In the Philippines, every year they celebrate Easter by nailing guys to crosses, which I'm like, God, thank you, I'm not a Filipino. I'm happy about that. Of course, they sterilize the nails and everything, but they really do nail these guys to crosses. It's really strange. But there's just this intensity and this devotion. And as I was sitting there reading about the festivities of what they were doing with that, there was a T-shirt ad that popped up on the news article there, and I was like, this looks interesting, and I clicked on it, and it was a T-shirt of Jesus. But he looked like a zombie, and it says, "Zombie Jesus wants your heart." I was like, that's really actually kind of funny for me. I don't know why. It just was odd and strange, and and thinking about Jesus wants to come into your heart, and those words and terms that we use in Christianity. We look at it and go, it just seems odd. Also this week I was reminded of Jim Gaffin. I don't know if you guys have ever heard Jim Gaffin. He's a comedian, and he's the Hot Pocket guy, if you're familiar with him that does that. He has this one big long sketch on Easter tradition, on holiday traditions. He talks about Christmas, and he says, Christmas is a really strange holiday. Hey, it's the day of Jesus' birth, but we celebrate it kind of like a drunk man. Like, hey, let's cut down a tree and put it in the house. And then the wife looks at him and says, honey, why is there a Christmas tree in the house? I like it. We're going to decorate it and light it up for Jesus. Okay? And then he says, what about Easter? Hey, Easter, the day Jesus rose from the dead. How should we celebrate that? Let's have eggs. I don't follow your logic. Okay, well, hide them. What does that do? Well, don't worry, there's a bunny. Funny thing when you think about Easter. But really it is the pivotal moment in the establishment of the faith of Christianity hinges around this event. Really, because it is the moment that gives us as Christians hope that we had no other way. We celebrate Christmas and we realize that God came to earth and touched earth with human fingerprints and transformed our lives in that capacity. It's a strange thing to think of God coming to earth and being a man, and then we skip fast forward all the way over to Jesus dying on the cross and being buried and raising again on the third day and bringing us newness of life in Him. But there's this 33-year gap between those two events that we really are to be celebrating the rest of our time with. We celebrate Christmas one day, we celebrate Easter another day, but the other 363 days of the year, we are to be celebrating the 33 years of life that Jesus modeled for us. And we celebrate those not by doing special traditions, not by having additional worship services, but we do those with the passion and the burden to be just like Jesus. To love as Jesus did, to endure as Jesus did, to be tempted as Jesus did, to be angry as Jesus did, to serve as Jesus did, to love as Jesus did, and all of these things that we've talked about. But the interesting thing about doing that, about being just like Jesus every other day of the year, is, friends, that if you have ever tried to do it, you find out it's impossible. You can't do it. You can't. If you could, then Easter really had no meaning. If we really could be perfect, we could be just like Jesus every other day of the year. We could be good enough, we could go to church enough, we could pray enough, we could give enough, we could be nice enough, we could care enough. Then what was the purpose of Easter? What was the purpose of the sacrifice? What was the purpose of the cross? What use was the suffering? What use was the shame? What use was the mockery? The answer is it had none. If it is really just left up to us. You see, Easter is what sets us apart from the rest of the world. And it really was the point of which we were established as this faith we call Christianity. About who we are and who God has made us to be. Look with me in John chapter 11. We're going to start back just a little bit from what I have listed there in verse 17 to give you a little bit of back feed on it. Jesus had some very dear friends. Two ladies, a lady named Mary and another lady named Martha, and their brother Lazarus. And Lazarus was very sick. The sisters called to Jesus to come from another city to heal him and take care of him. Jesus delayed and tarried, such to the point that Lazarus died. And in verse 17, we pick this up, and it says this: on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. He is dead. He's gone. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Verse 21 begins, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Then she goes on to say in verse 22, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And then Martha delves into theology, into a theological struggle of their day. We have theological struggles in our day. You hear about them all the time. What is the meaning of life? What is the relationship of science and theology? What is the order of the church? What is the role of the church? All these are theological questions that lots of people wrestle with, even in our own day. In Jesus' time, they had similar wrestles and similar struggles, and one of them was this concept of the resurrection. That there would be some day, some end result, when life would be brought back into God's people, and there would be this resurrection that would take place, this supernatural event. And there was a heated debate in their culture of what that looked like. There were the Sadducees, who were the religious leaders of their day. They were very liberal in their theology. They didn't really believe the Old Testament was what it said it was. And the easiest way to remember them is they were sad, you see, as you say Sadducee, they were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in the resurrection. Life to them was the end. And much like so many people today believe that there is coming a day when we will breathe our last, we will then turn back into dust, and that's it. That's all we got. It's the end. You disappear into nothingness. Then there was the other theological side, which did believe in the resurrection, and you can see that Martha finds herself at that place. Martha says, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Now we pick up to what Jesus, or the main text of our sermon this morning, verse 25. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies.